My name is Rachel Miller. I'm 29 years old. And this is how I took revenge on the man who shattered me and made me stronger than I ever imagined. I never thought my story would begin with a single door handle, but it did. The night I twisted it open, expecting comfort, laughter, and the smell of dinner, I walked straight into hell. It was my apartment, my sanctuary, the place where I dreamed about our future, where I whispered my plans into the air late at night while he held me close. But that night, the air was thick with betrayal. Two wine glasses sat half empty on the coffee table, still warm. A bottle I bought for us, for our celebration. The lamp glowed low, casting a honey-colored light over the scene I can never unsee. My fiancé, Daniel, was sitting there, and beside him, my best friend, Emily. The look on their faces, it wasn't guilt, not even surprise. It was worse. It was resignation, as if they had already rehearsed this moment, already decided that I was strong enough to survive it, and weak enough to be discarded like some worn-out chapter in their story. My heart didn't just break, it detonated. I can't tell you which pain struck first. The gut punch humiliation of realizing the man I was supposed to marry, the man I built a business with from scratch, was sharing himself with someone else. Or the suffocating silence that followed, a silence so heavy it pressed into my bones, telling me that everything, love, trust, family dinners, whispered dreams of children, had been a carefully constructed illusion. I remember dropping the keys. The metallic clatter against the hardwood floor sliced through the silence, and for a moment, we all just froze. Daniel tried to speak first, his lips parting with some pathetic excuse. But I didn't let him. I couldn't. If he spoke, if words were exchanged, it would become real in a way I wasn't ready to accept. Instead, I turned away. I walked out without screaming, without tears, without even demanding an explanation. And that, I think, scared them more than anything. But the truth, the moment I closed that door, I broke completely. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my nails dug into the leather. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and left me to collapse in on myself. The girl who walked into that apartment was gone. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the rearview mirror. Pale, trembling, her eyes wide and vacant. For hours, I stayed parked there, letting wave after wave crash through me. Memories replayed, our first kiss, our first office, the late nights building our company from nothing. All poison now, all lies. But here's the part they never saw coming. That night, in the wreckage of my life, a seed was planted. Because when you lose everything, love, trust, your entire identity, you're left with nothing but the choice to rebuild. And rebuild I would, but not as the woman they remembered, not as the woman who forgave or reasoned or begged. No, I would rebuild as the woman who destroys. That night, I broke. But in breaking, I found the kind of strength that doesn't forgive. It destroys. I wasn't born into privilege. I was born into survival. I grew up in a small town most people drive past without ever knowing its name. My mother raised me on her own, a waitress who worked double shifts, her hands always smelling faintly of coffee and dish soap. She didn't have much, but what she gave me was everything: loyalty, grit, and an unshakable belief that if you wanted a better life, you had to build it with your own two hands. I learned early that love wasn't a guarantee, but hard work could keep you alive. My mom never complained, but I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, and I promised myself, standing in our cramped kitchen one night while she counted tips, that I would give her a reason to rest someday. I would make her proud. Loyalty, ambition, dreams that felt bigger than my little town. Those were my foundations. And then, in college, I met Ethan. Ethan had that kind of charm that made people lean in closer when he spoke. He was ambitious, hungry, not just for money, but for something lasting. He wanted to build, to create, to conquer, and for the first time, I felt like someone else saw the same future I did. We stayed up until sunrise, sketching plans, scribbling ideas on napkins, convincing ourselves that we could outwork anyone, outdream anyone. We started with nothing but laptops, caffeine, and blind faith, a boutique marketing agency run from a tiny apartment where the Wi Fi barely worked and the neighbors pounded on the walls every time we celebrated a client win too loudly. But step by step, brick by brick, we made it real. People noticed. Soon, we weren't just Rachel and Ethan. We were that couple, the power pair, the story everyone envied. Two young entrepreneurs in love, building an empire together. Competitors whispered about us. Clients respected us. Friends toasted to us at every dinner. And behind it all, I had Lily. Lily wasn't just my best friend. She was my anchor. We met when we were 12. Two awkward girls who found each other in the chaos of adolescence. She was the sister I never had, the one I could call at 2 a.m. when the world felt like too much. She knew every scar, every secret, every dream I ever whispered. And she stayed. Through heartbreaks, failures, triumphs, she stayed. Ethan loved her too, in the way you love someone who belongs to your partner. She was family. She sat front row at our business launches, helped me choose the dress when Ethan proposed, even wrote part of the toast at our engagement party. I never doubted her place in my life. I never imagined that trust could be anything but eternal. Looking back now, I see how dangerous that kind of certainty is. When you trust too blindly, you stop checking for cracks. Because on the surface, my life was finally everything I had fought for. The business was thriving. We were weeks away from opening a second office. Ethan and I were planning a wedding that would have made my mother cry with joy. And for the first time, I saw the pride in her eyes when she looked at me. She used to say, "Rachel, you've carried us both farther than I ever dreamed." Those words wrapped around me like armor. I thought I was finally safe, finally steady. Every magazine article that called us a rising power couple, every friend who said we were perfect together, every night I fell asleep next to Ethan, believing that tomorrow would be brighter than today. It all fed into the illusion. I thought I had everything. A man who loved me, a best friend who was like blood, a business that proved I had turned scraps into gold, a mother who finally didn't have to worry about me anymore. But here's the truth I didn't see. Perfection is the prettiest disguise for ruin, because while I believed I was standing on solid ground, while I smiled for photos and planned a future that seemed untouchable, the earth beneath me was already splitting open. I was standing on cracks, and soon everything I built was going to collapse. The night I opened that door is burned into me like a scar that will never fade. I didn't just see them, I felt them. The intimacy in the air, the warmth of the wine glasses still half full, the lingering electricity between their bodies. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and my hands trembled so violently I could barely keep hold of my keys. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, to demand answers that I already knew I would hate. But my voice betrayed me. It stayed locked in my throat, as if even my body refused to make this nightmare real. Inside, I was screaming so loud I thought my ribcage would burst. But outside, I was silent, and in that silence, Ethan looked at me like a stranger. Not guilty, not even ashamed. Cold, detached. Rachel, he said flatly, as if rehearsed, you've been too focused on work. I need someone who actually sees me. I remember staring at him, trying to process the words. Too focused on work? Our work? The company we built side by side, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the sacrifices, all of it done for us, for him, for the dream he swore we shared, and now he twisted it into the weapon he stabbed me with. But what cut deeper was Lily. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just sat there, leaning into him slightly, her lips curved into something between a smirk and a victory grin, as if this was always the end game, as if she hadn't stolen not just my fiancé, but the life we were supposed to build together. That expression shattered me more than any words could. I left before they could see me fall apart. But the real wreckage didn't come until days later, when the betrayal stretched beyond my heart and bled into everything else I'd built. 3 days after that night, an envelope arrived. Thick, heavy, legal. Inside were papers, neatly typed, meticulously prepared, that told me Ethan wasn't just leaving me. He was pushing me out of the company we co-founded, the business we grew from nothing, the one that bore both our fingerprints on every contract, every strategy, every success story. He wanted it stripped from me. He'd filed to dissolve our partnership, claiming I was unstable, distracted, unable to contribute effectively. His words, not mine. Legal jargon crafted into poison. In the space of 72 hours, I lost my fiancé, my best friend, my reputation, and my career. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was erased. Clients called, confused. Rumors swirled, carefully planted by Ethan, no doubt, about why I was suddenly gone. Whispers that I had burned out, that I was bitter, that I couldn't handle the pressure. My inbox flooded with questions, pity, and silence from people who had once toasted to my success. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the crushing weight of it all pressing down on my chest. How could two people dismantle me so completely? Ethan, the man who had promised me forever, and Lily, the friend who had promised me loyalty. The engagement ring sat abandoned on the counter, its sparkle now mocking me. The desk where I once drafted proposals was empty, a reminder that my role, my voice, my identity had been ripped away. My phone, once my lifeline, now buzzed only with gossip I didn't want to read. I felt hollow, powerless, a ghost haunting the life I had built. But here's the thing about pain. It doesn't just destroy, it transforms. Because in those nights when the grief was unbearable, when I thought I couldn't breathe another second under the weight of it all, something inside me sharpened. My heartbreak hardened into resolve. My silence turned into strategy. And the woman who once built her life on love and trust began to build something else entirely. That was the shift. I thought I was powerless, but pain has a way of sharpening your claws. The weeks that followed felt like drowning with no surface in sight. I stopped answering calls. I stopped meeting friends. Even grocery stores felt like minefields. What if someone recognized me, pitied me, whispered about me the second I turned away? Shame became my shadow, following me everywhere. Most nights, I sat in my dark apartment with nothing but a bottle of wine for company. The silence was suffocating, yet I couldn't bear music or TV. Noise felt dishonest. My life was too broken for distraction. And while I hid, Ethan and Lily flourished. They didn't just betray me in private, they paraded it. Their smiling faces began showing up on social media feeds, tagged in restaurants Ethan and I once went to, on trips Lily and I once planned together. The new power couple, people whispered. They walked into industry events arm in arm, my replacement story already written. I didn't have to hear the whispers to know they were there. Pity from some, mockery from others. A few colleagues even reached out with that patronizing tone. "We're so sorry, Rachel, but maybe it's for the best." Every picture of them together felt like a knife twisting deeper. They looked radiant, untouchable, as if my absence made them glow brighter. And me? I was the ghost, the forgotten chapter. It was humiliation, stacked on humiliation. I wanted to disappear. Some nights, I almost did. But then, my mother. One evening, she showed up at my door, no warning, just a fierce knock that rattled the frame. When I finally let her in, she didn't waste time on pity. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Rachel, you can either let them bury you, or you can bury them with the truth." It was the first spark of fire I'd felt in weeks. Truth. That word became oxygen, because buried inside my despair was something I had overlooked: knowledge. I knew Ethan better than anyone. His habits, his weaknesses, the corners he cut when he thought no one was looking. I'd been too loyal before, too trusting. But now, loyalty was a corpse. All that remained was memory. And memory, when written down, becomes evidence. So I began documenting, slowly, carefully, like stitching together a weapon from scraps. Every late-night email I once ignored, every financial record tucked into folders, every contract Ethan drafted that raised questions. I went back to them. I spread papers across my floor, highlighted inconsistencies, flagged shady deals. Patterns emerged, dark threads weaving through what once looked like success. And while Ethan flaunted his new life, I rebuilt mine in silence. I started freelancing, quietly, reaching out to clients Ethan had burned, the ones who left meetings with more resentment than respect. They remembered me. Some even welcomed me. I worked long nights, sometimes from the same apartment that once felt like a graveyard, slowly proving to people and to myself that Rachel Miller wasn't finished. But the truth? I was still at war with myself. Some days, anger carried me like adrenaline, every heartbeat screaming for revenge. Other days, exhaustion pulled me back into the bottle, whispering that none of this mattered, that they had already won. I wrestled with it constantly. The ache of healing versus the hunger for payback. I'd sit at my desk with evidence scattered before me, my hands trembling not from fear, but from rage. And yet, when the sun rose, there were mornings I almost deleted everything, tempted to let it all go, to find peace in surrender. But then, I'd see another headline, another photo of Ethan and Lily, grinning at some gala, arm in arm like royalty. Another whisper in the industry that I had burned out. And just like that, peace became impossible. I remember one night, vividly. I was sitting on my floor, papers surrounding me like the wreckage of a life. My laptop glowed with documents that could expose Ethan, could ruin everything he had stolen from me. My chest was tight, my hands shaking. For a moment, I thought, what if I'm too small to fight them? What if all I can do is lose again? But then, another thought cut through the fear, sharp and unyielding. What if I win? That possibility, that single burning possibility, became my anchor. I started moving differently, calculated, patient. I smiled in public again, just enough to look harmless. I answered calls with a steady voice. I let Ethan and Lily believe they had buried me, that I was too broken to rise. But behind the scenes, I sharpened every claw. Every document became a blade. Every contact I reconnected with became a step closer to rebuilding what they stole. Every night I worked, instead of drank, was another brick in the fortress I was quietly constructing. It wasn't healing, not really. Healing felt too soft, too forgiving. What I was doing wasn't about peace. It was about preparation. Because if they wanted war, they picked the wrong woman to betray. And I was ready to show them exactly what kind of woman they have. Revenge is never loud at the start. It whispers, it plots, it builds in the dark until the moment it's ready to strike. And when I struck, I made sure it was surgical. Months of documentation turned into a carefully packaged storm. Every fraudulent invoice Ethan signed, every backroom deal he tried to bury, every client account he siphoned funds from. I collected it all, line by line, date by date, signature by signature. The kind of evidence no spin, no lawyer, no charm could erase. And I didn't stop there, because Ethan was the face of our downfall, but Lily was the poison dripping silently in the background. Through old emails and buried threads, I found proof that she had been undermining me for months before the affair was exposed, accidentally misdirecting client messages, planting doubts in investors' minds, quietly sabotaging my work so Ethan could swoop in as the savior. She didn't just betray me personally, she dismantled me professionally. The day I unleashed it all, I did it with precision. An anonymous dossier to our investors, an encrypted drive to a journalist who had been circling rumors about Ethan for years, a quiet tip to the regulatory board, and finally, the emails, the ones Lily thought were long forgotten, forwarded to the clients who had once trusted me. It was like dropping a match into a dry forest. By the next morning, the blaze was everywhere. Articles spread like wildfire, headlines screaming about financial fraud and deception. Investors fled within hours, pulling their money and demanding answers. Clients cancelled contracts, their names vanishing from the company website as fast as the page could be updated. The empire Ethan had stolen from me crumbled faster than we had ever built it. And then came the investigations. Government officials stepping into boardrooms, subpoenas delivered like death sentences. Ethan's confident grin disappeared from the public eye, replaced with a pale, frantic man dodging cameras. The whispers that once mocked me now echoed around him. And Lily? The cracks in their so-called power couple facade showed instantly. Investors saw her not as his partner, but as his accomplice. Clients no longer admired her as the clever, charming strategist. They saw her as a snake. And when cornered, snakes slither to save themselves. She turned on him faster than even I expected. Behind closed doors, Lily cut her own deal, offering to testify, offering evidence of Ethan's fraud in exchange for leniency. The same woman who smirked at me that night on the couch, the same woman who thought she had won, dropped Ethan the second the fire burned too close. And that's when the confrontation came. He found me in the lobby of a hotel where one of my new clients was hosting an event. He looked nothing like the man I once knew. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking with a fury that barely held him together. "Rachel!" he spat, cornering me by the elevators. His voice cracked, a mix of rage and desperation. "You ruined my life. Do you understand that? You destroyed everything I worked for, everything I am." I didn't flinch. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small in his presence. I didn't feel broken. I felt steady, cold, untouchable. I looked him dead in the eyes and said calmly, "No, Ethan, you ruined mine. I just returned the favor." His face contorted, searching for power he no longer had. But power isn't in words, it's in outcomes, and his outcome was already sealed. The next day, the image hit the press. Ethan Carter, once the golden boy of boutique marketing, being escorted out of his own office by federal investigators. His hands behind his back, his head bowed, his empire reduced to rubble. Lily was nowhere in sight. She had already cut her deal, already sold him out to save herself. And I stood across the street, watching from the shadows, as the man who thought he was untouchable was paraded in disgrace. For a long moment, I let the sight burn into me, not because it erased the pain, nothing ever could, but because it proved one truth I would never forget. When you betray someone who has nothing left to lose, you don't just create an enemy, you create your downfall. And Ethan learned that lesson the hard way. When the smoke finally cleared, I was left staring at the rubble of two lives, Ethan's and my own. His empire was gone, his reputation was ash. Lily vanished into obscurity, clawing for scraps in an industry that no longer trusted her name. And me, I had no company, no best friend, no fiancé, nothing but a stack of documents, a broken heart, and the quiet question, what now? At first, the silence after the storm was unsettling. For months, revenge had been my oxygen, the fuel that got me out of bed, the reason I didn't disappear. And once it was done, once Ethan was exposed and Lily turned on him, there was a hollow space inside me. Revenge gave me closure, but closure is not the same as peace. So I started from nothing, again, not with fanfare, not with magazine spreads calling me a powerhouse, but with a single desk, a second-hand laptop, and a handful of clients who believed in me when everyone else walked away. I built slowly, carefully, choosing integrity over shortcuts, listening more than I spoke. Each new contract felt like a brick in a foundation that was finally mine, not shared, not stolen, mine. And in that rebuilding, I learned something even more important, who to let in and who to keep out. I cut ties with the people who had only been drawn to the image of Rachel Miller, the power couple half, the ones who pitied me but never truly saw me. I chose instead the people who stuck through the silence, who checked on me when I disappeared, who reminded me that strength doesn't mean carrying the world alone. Slowly, I built healthier friendships, rooted not in envy or appearances, but in loyalty and respect. And yes, I learned to trust again, but only after I learned to trust myself first. There were nights I questioned every choice, wondering if the revenge had poisoned me as much as the betrayal. But each time doubt whispered, I reminded myself, I didn't destroy Ethan, I revealed him. I didn't become cruel, I became awake. One evening, sitting across from my mother at the same kitchen table where she once counted tip money, she reached across, held my hand, and said, Rachel, you're stronger than you've ever been. I always knew you would be. And for the first time, I believed her, because revenge hadn't erased the pain. It hadn't magically healed the betrayal, but it had given me something just as valuable, my power back. I walked through fire. I burned. I bled. But I came out standing. And as for Ethan and Lily, forgiveness was never an option. Some people don't deserve a second chance. Some people need to stay as ashes in your story. I don't believe in forgiving people who set fire to my life, but I do believe in surviving the flames and walking out unburned. If you've made it this far, you know the truth. Not just about what they did, but about what it cost me. They thought betrayal would break me, and for a while it did. I lost myself in the wreckage, in the silence, in the humiliation of being replaced, erased, forgotten. I was shattered in ways I didn't think a person could recover from. But the truth is, pain doesn't just destroy, it forges. It strips you down until all that's left is the raw, unflinching version of yourself. The part that can't be bought, can't be manipulated, can't be broken. That's who I became. Not the Rachel who built an empire for someone else. Not the Rachel who trusted too blindly, loved too recklessly. But the Rachel who rose from the fire, tempered and unyielding. And here's what I've learned: betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you rise after. Do you stay buried under the weight of their lies? Or do you dig yourself out and make them choke on the truth? I chose the latter. Ethan took my trust. Lily took my loyalty. But pain gave me something they never had: a spine made of steel. And that's why, no matter what they do next, no matter how hard they try to rewrite the story, they'll never break me again.